with Ted Vaill, a member of ours. Did a program. He did 2 trips into Tibet and searching for Shangri-La. And so he's here to tell us a little bit about that tonight. Thank you for coming.
Sure.
Pardon the excruciating heat in here. We've had our adventure with AV and all kinds of things tonight. So been an adventure. Tell us a little bit about yourself to begin with. Before, how did you end up on that journey?
Well, I'm a lawyer originally from Connecticut. Been in LA since the 60s. Practiced law here, and starting in the early 60s, I was a park ranger in the Tetons, climbing mountains and rescuing people and bodies off the peaks. And I became a very active mountaineer in the United States, and then gradually went abroad and did some climbing in the volcanoes of Mexico, and then ultimately in 1969 I went to Nepal with an American expedition to climb Dhaulagiri, one of the 8,000 meter peaks. And as I explained to somebody earlier, I climbed another peak to get altitude training, and on the way back I got dysentery, so I had to cancel from the expedition, which was one of the most fortunate things in my life, because everyone but one on the expedition died in a huge avalanche. My good friend Lou Reichert, whom I've spent a lot of time with since, he was the one survivor. But in one huge avalanche, all the top mountaineers of the United States died, except for Lou. And no one ever found a thing of their remains after that. It was buried under hundreds of feet of a huge avalanche. So that didn't deter me from continuing to climb, and I would climb in Europe, and I've actually made 20 trips to China. And
that's it?
Only 20. 7 to Tibet, and of those. And you asked me to look at you rather than the audience, so.
You should be fluent in the languages then.
Right. Well, not so much. A little bit of Chinese and a little bit of Tibetan. But one person I'm going to talk about is Peter Klika, who, if you look out there, he's number 943. He's on the board there. He and I had done 5 expeditions together, and he is still doing, in his mid-70s, still doing major expeditions. And one of the things he's doing is, I've urged him to do this. He's writing a book called The Great Dive Bars of the Far East. And I've seen a lot of pictures of it and said, Peter, you've got to get this book done. But he is the spirit of the Adventurers Club. Even though he hasn't been here in many years, he lives in Seattle and travels the world. But he and I have done a lot of expeditions, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him later.
See, that's an expedition I could get behind.
Right.
So, you've set the stage a little bit for Shangri-La and the expedition that you undertook.
Yeah.
How did you get interested in it, and what led up to it?
Well, that's Peter Klika. Peter, being the adventurer he was, he was a member of the 1983 expedition that I led that made the first ascent of Celestial Peak in Tibet, 17,000, almost 18,000 feet, up a 6,000-foot vertical wall over a week on the mountain, and the hardest technical climb done in China to that date. And Peter was on that expedition, and we developed a good friendship, and he said, we're going to do other things together. And he found in National Geographic a thing about a place called the Kingdom of Muli, National Geographic from the 1920s. And he said, I'm going to go there. Ted, you want to come with me? Well, business commitments prevented me from doing so. But in 1989, he went there with a small group, and it was magical. They found this place, and everyone who went there was affected for the rest of their life by what they saw and felt and heard. And he went back in 1990. I couldn't go then either. I had a lot of business commitments in China. I was in China and other places, couldn't go. He went in 94, I couldn't go. In 1998, he said, I'm going again. I said, okay, I'm going this time.
Last chance.
So this was, I said, Peter, this is your Shangri-La. And maybe it has something to do with the real Shangri-La. And so if you want to know something about Shangri-La, this is the book, Lost Horizon, written in 1933 by James Hilton, an English author who had written Goodbye, Mr. Chips, and a number of other books. And in 1933, the depths of the Depression, he wrote this book. This is the paperback version. It was the first paperback ever published, still in print. You can get it in the bookstore. And I would recommend you go out and read it. But it resonated with the people of the world because here was a place where no one gets sick, where everything is at peace. The great art and music of the world is played and kept. And as the world degenerated into another world war a number of years later, this is a place of peace. And so when people read this book, they felt at peace reading it. And in fact, in the book, he has a paragraph where he talks about that fact that this is 1933. He says, in a few years, the entire world will be at war, but hopefully they will ignore us because we're in such a remote place and we will survive. And with World War II and the atomic bomb and things, we came close. So this book, being as popular as it was, had to be made into a movie, and Lost Horizon was made in 1937 by the great director Frank Capra. And it won 2 Academy Awards, and Columbia Pictures put it on. It was a very expensive movie to film. They had, no one could go to Tibet at that time. It was filmed here in Los Angeles and in the mountains outside Los Angeles, Sierras. And it did very well. It won several Academy Awards, starred Ronald Colman and Jane Wyatt, not Jane Wyman, who was the wife of Ronald Reagan, but Jane Wyatt, who I happened to meet before she died in 1996. She was the last surviving member of the cast and crew of the movie, a wonderful lady who was in a number of fine films and television shows. Father Knows Best, if anybody remembers that. She was in that, played the wife in that. Just a wonderful woman. But I forgot to mention also that James Hilton himself never went to Tibet. How was he going to write a book about Tibet? Can't go there, no one is able to go there. So he went to the British Museum Library, and in the British Museum Library, he found these articles by Joseph Rock from the 1920s and early 1930s that talked about this strange kingdom of Muli in the very southern and western part of Sichuan province. Not what is today the autonomous region of Tibet, but the Tibetan district of Sichuan province, which in a lot of ways is much more like Tibet as it used to be than the Tibet of today, which the Chinese have taken over and unfortunately ruined some of, like Lhasa, putting McDonald's in Lhasa and things like that. And the Chinese, they're pushing Chinese people to live in Tibet, and Tibetan culture in those areas is being undermined. But not in this area of Sichuan province, a different administration, not quite as harsh, and the Chinese are sort of afraid to go there. And it has a lot of minority populations. The Yi minority, which is a matriarchal society, is there. And so it's run more or less by the Yi people, the whole area. And I will talk later about one particular member, Mr. Su. Remember that name. So Peter and I said, Peter, you must have, this is your Shangri-La. I wonder if it has anything to do with the real Shangri-La. So I read this book, and I came up with 20-some points of proof that said you had to have been reading Joseph Rock's National Geographic stories. You had to have read them. He even mentions in this book an American Geographical Society, which to me is an absolute giveaway that he was sitting in the library, the British Museum Library, and reading from Joseph Rock's trips into the Muli region. And he also read stories of various missionaries, Catholic missionaries, who came to the region over the centuries. And he created the High Lama, who was a sort of a combination of the Christianity of the missionaries and the Tibetan Buddhist religion. It sort of, the High Lama in the book was in fact a Belgian missionary who went to Tibet and founded the monastery, took a ruined monastery and made it into a beautiful monastery. So he was the High Lama was not strictly Tibetan, but was a British or was a Belgian missionary person.
So was it a Buddhist monastery that he founded, or was it?
It was a Buddhist monastery,
okay.
But and if you look at the film, this is Hollywood's vision of what a Buddhist monastery looks like, with a little bit of Frank Lloyd Wright thrown in, and not what you might expect. And they built this huge monastery up in Burbank. It's not there anymore, but and a huge amount of money to do this thing. And that was where they filmed much of the film. In addition to going out into areas like Tahquitz Falls in Palm Springs, and up in the Sierras, and the dry lake beds up in the Sierras and the desert. And so the whole film was filmed right here in Hollywood. They had snowstorms, which they filmed in an ice storage unit in downtown LA, and they took ice chips and they blew it, blew air vents, fans through to make it look like snow. And there actually was cold breath coming out of the actors' mouths. Nowadays, when they do these films, they do it with CGI. They fake the breath in the films. But then it was real. They were really cold inside these inside this storage unit in downtown LA.
Interesting. So you got together and planned to go with him on this trip. This was in '99. The trip occurred.
We started in 1998 by putting it together.
Okay.
And so we wanted to do a film on it, and so we brought together a team of people who were interested in Shangri-La and Lost Horizon. One of them was Peter Facer, who was a British filmmaker, and he was fascinated with the idea. And we also brought in Gloria, who was another assistant producer, and then Peter's girlfriend. So Peter's girlfriend was with us too. So 5 of us went in, and we used a Chinese guy, Zhang Jiwei, who was we had used on the '83 expedition as a Chinese liaison person to take care of all the details with the Chinese, and then we also brought in Mr. Su, who was of the Yi minority, who was a major sports figure in that part of China, and he was known by everybody in the province. It's like if you got LeBron James to go with you on a trip.
So what kind of sport was he?
Track and field, and things like that, and a very famous athlete. Later, he had a different role because he was with us again in 2014 when we went back, but I'll talk about that later. So we put this together, and the Chinese were, from 1983, the Chinese, they even have a yak parking fee when you go in on a trip. You have to have a budget, and they charge for everything. But I actually, in the '83 expedition, I actually got some money back, probably the first and only expedition to ever get money back from the Chinese.
You got a refund on something?
Refund, right. So we put it together, and we wanted to do the film, and so we raised some money to do a film. And in 1999, the cameras were pretty heavy. We brought in 2 big video cameras, and later, of course, you can film with the much smaller cameras.
Sure.
When we came in 14, so we fly to Chengdu, and which is the capital of Sichuan province, and then get in a big bus and go off on our way to getting into the Shangri-La Valley from the north. And do you want to put up some of the pictures?
Yeah. So
where are they?
They're on the TVs on either side of us.
Oh,
here,
are they?
so,
Okay,
yeah.
I see. Yeah. So that one is. It's hard to see what that one is. That shows them. Does that show the geography of it? I can't see it very well here, but.
Yeah. Can you give us an idea of kind of the distance that we're talking about? And some verbal description of the geography we're encountering.
You leave Chengdu, which is the plains of like Chicago and the breadbasket of China, and then you go up into the mountains over a 17,000-foot pass, and then down the other side, and through some very, very difficult country, good roads, bad roads, tunnels, and in a day, a very long day, we reach a town called Litong, which should be on the map, one of the maps that I can't. I can't see where we're talking about, but Litong is the highest town in the world, or one of them, 14,000 feet. It's maybe 25, 30,000 people, and it's quite an interesting place. And then from there we went south in the direction of the mountains, and reached the last point of civilization. And from there we had horses that carried our gear, and our little group of 7 people, the 5 from Westerners, Zhang Jiwei, and also Mr. Su, who had joined us en route. And so we are going up over 4 high mountain passes, 15,500 feet to 16,500 feet. And we first of all go up to a monastery that had been there for a good amount of time. In fact, Joseph Rock had stayed in this little monastery, Snow Mountain Monastery. And then we went on from there to the base of a peak called Jambayang, which was the model for Caracal, which is the peak name that Joseph Rock, that Hilton put in the book, and Jambayang was figured prominently in some of the pictures that Joseph Rock took. And from there, after being at the base of that peak, Peter Klika and I decided we took a rest day at this point, and Peter and I decided to hike up and climb up on Jambayang, a peak that had never been climbed, and still has never been climbed. And we went up a ways onto the glacier below the huge face there, not intending to climb it, but just to explore it for maybe future expeditions. It's been attempted 4 or 5 times, never successfully. It's avalanche danger and loose rock, and everybody who's tried it has said they'd never go back. So after that rest day, we then went up over the first pass, and then to our beautiful campground. All of this is being filmed, and I have the film with me. It's a little long to show to you. I intend at the end of this to show you a 10-minute segment from our second expedition that shows a lot about the monastery rather than this trip. So you'll have to accept, and some of the pictures you may be seeing on the screen, although I can't really see them from here, show some of the pictures of that the trip over the high mountain passes, the 4 passes. So we have a camp in the between the first and the second pass. The next day we go up over the second pass, and then it's a very high level. You go up to the third pass, which is 16,500 feet, and jumping way forward to 2014. When we came up the other way, we went high up near the Fountain of Youth that we found. The Tibetans regard as the Fountain of Youth, and there were a number of tourists going by, doing the climb now. They didn't make it. There was a big snowstorm, and 2 of them died going over the pass. And right about the area where we were now, at the top of the 16,500 foot pass. The area between those 2 passes is very high, windy, not a tree, and very foreboding. And then we went down from there to our next camp. And this was a very long day. We were all very tired. And so we're camping out in tents, and we have our horses with us that are taking a lot of our heavy gear. And then the next day we go up over Yaka Pass, the last pass. And this was one of the worst days because it was heavy sleet as we were going over the pass. And it was about 16,000 feet. And so you're going down to 12, 13,000, then you're going back up to 16. And we've been traveling a number of days now and getting very tired. So we go down after that pass, and so we know we are getting close to Shangri-La, and but we have one last day to go before we reach the Shangri-La Valley. And this turned out to be the longest day of our trip. We finished the high passes, but it just was so long, so long. The one bright spot was we reached the Fountain of Youth. And there should be some pictures somewhere there it is, if it's being shown. That's the Fountain of Youth, which comes out of one of the three holy peaks, Shanrazi, Jambayang, and Chanadorji. So these three holy peaks, and you have the water that's been frozen for 1 million years coming out of the mountain. And I happen to bring some. And one of you is going to, if you want to, is going to have a drink of that water. It's the person who has a glass under their chair.
All right.
That's it, yes. Oh, wait a minute, no, that's your glass. There, that's the glass I put there, right there.
All right.
Right. So if you want it, at the end here, I will give you a small drink from Shangri-La. Now, we tested this water, and the water has minute particles of gold in it, because this whole area is loaded with gold. And you may wonder what this is. This is these are nuggets of gold that I brought back from there, and the whole area is filled with gold nuggets. And in fact, dating back to the days of Kublai Khan in the 12th century, he used to come into this area and mine the region for gold, or the natives would do so for him, and he would. But in the valley of Shangri-La, they have these towers all the way through the valley, and you may see a few of the pictures of the towers later. And in the tops of the towers would be straw, and the valley was something where you only come in one way. And as Kublai Khan's people would come in, the locals would light the fires on the towers, and then the next tower they'd light it. So that told the whole valley that the invaders, the Mongols, were coming.
It's the early warning system.
The early warning system, correct. And so, and then all the locals would take their gold and their valuables and their children, and they'd go up into the mountains to their hiding places.
Yeah.
So they.
So where did you get this gold? How did you? Out of the rivers, or how did you?
I bought it.
Come on.
I bought it from one of the. You know, it's. I paid about $100 for a good amount of gold here, which is now like $1,000 an ounce, $1,500 an ounce.
I'll meet you in the alley after the show.
Yeah, right. But you can go out there, and there's a picture that I think I included that shows a person panning for gold in the river there.
I think that's up now.
It's up there. Yeah, there you go. Right. So I can't see very well what's being done, but so we have a member of the club, Warner.
Yeah, Scott.
Who loves to do this. He wants to go to this area to do some panning for gold, because there's still a lot there. And so back to what we were doing. So that one day we went and finally found the Fountain of Youth, and we all had some of the water, and it was refreshing for us. And I brought water back from there. This is water I brought back from the second trip, and not the first. It's It's still 6 or 7 years old, but it's not 21 years old. But the water was very refreshing. But we had a long way to go from there. We had to go on to a stone house at the very end of the valley, and we didn't get in until 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Drifted in, and so there's a video I have that you won't see, but we were ushered in, and we were sleeping on the floor in what was the Buddhist prayer room of the house. And the next morning when we woke up to bells and Tibetan symbols, because the Tibetans were coming in and were doing their morning prayers.
Prayer service. Huh.
They take rice and they throw it at the altar as a way to wake up the gods, and then perform their morning rituals. So, and we had a nice meal there, and you find that the people of this area are used to people coming from other areas, not Westerners, but Tibetans, because just like going to Mecca, circumambulating the 3 holy peaks here is something that the Tibetan Buddhists of the area will do. And before they die, they should circumambulate the 3 holy peaks in a counterclockwise direction. We were doing it in a clockwise direction, so we weren't quite doing it right, but it was a very worthwhile experience. So the next day we went on from there down through the Shangri-La Valley, exploring all of the wonders of this valley. And there's a picture which I put in here of the village of Wawati. And there are 2 pictures of the village of Wawati. There it is. One of them at the top is from a 1920s National Geographic. The one on the bottom, the color print, was taken 70 years later. And the village was pretty much unchanged over that 70-year period. So we go on from there and ultimately reach the Monastery of Muli, which was part of the Kingdom of Muli. And Joseph Rock was very intrigued by the king of Muli, who was a complete autocrat, and he ruled this region as an iron fist. Nobody could ever leave the valley, period. So what did Hilton do? He took that thing that Joseph Rock talked about and said, anybody who leaves the Shangri-La Valley will revert to their true age, because in Shangri-La nobody ages. And there's a scene in the movie where the woman that one of the team becomes intrigued with, they go off and leave the valley, and instead of being in her 20s, she suddenly reverts to her 70s.
Remember that scene?
Yeah, it was an early version of like the digital effects.
Yeah.
So we reached the monastery, and it's a beautiful place, and we meet all the monks of the monastery. We meet the High Lama, and we show them pictures of Peter's earlier visits to this area. He had one picture of this little 6-year-old boy, and I have on film saying, "Is this boy still here?" And he pointed right here. He's now 16. And so we see the same boy now grown up into a teenager. And I have also video that of me showing them some of the picture postcard of Los Angeles and the freeways of Los Angeles. And here are people who had hardly ever seen a road. They were a little bit shocked at seeing pictures of Los Angeles. So from there, after visiting the monastery and attending a service there briefly, we went on and to the end of the road, or the beginning of the road, I mean, and where we were to meet our transportation back to civilization. And the road was as bad as any road that I've ever been on. If you've been on some of these different Asian roads, dirt roads, and people will come driving very fast, and they come up to a curve, and they say, okay, I'm going to honk my horn, and whoever's coming the other way, and it drops off 1,000 feet, they're going to know I'm coming, so they'll stop. But then you see the wrecked vehicles 1,000 feet below that didn't stop, so we crossed this landslide, and so the driver said, everybody please get out of the car right now. And so we got out. So they said, okay, now I want you to walk across very quickly across the landslide, because it was an active landslide there. And so, and it dropped off 1,000 feet down below. And so we raced across, and then he looked at a time when the boulders weren't coming down, and he took the car right across. In 2014, we had to come across that same landslide, because in these areas of Tibet, they don't have time to rebuild the roads. All they have time to do is clear the roads, because they have a very limited season. And so they cleared the road, and the next year, the same problems happen. And
just keeps moving on down the mountain.
Yeah. There is a picture of there that shows that is the landslide, and there's the cracks in the road where it drops off 1,000 feet. Now we have these large trucks coming through, and we wonder which truck is going to be the one that's going to trigger the whole thing to fall down the mountain. You will see a little bit later the video that I did of this going across this road. So from there we finally get out to Xichang. Xichang is a major city in China, because that's the city where their rockets take off into space, and still does. So we took a train back to Kathmandu, and that was the end of the trip. And we got home. We worked on trying to sell our movie, and not a lot of success. We talked to Steven Seagal. He thought he was interested. Don't ever talk to Steven Seagal. Not a nice guy. But we finally got enough money together to finish the film, and it debuted at the Cannes Film Festival and has won a few awards, and we're proud of the film. So that was 1999, and we were also talking at this time to people who we have found the real life Shangri-La. Well, there is no real Shangri-La. It's a mythical place invented by James Hilton, but it's based on a real place. He had a real place in mind when he wrote the book. And in the film, they changed it a little bit. I have a picture somewhere. That's Jean Bayang there. I have a map that he may be able to find that shows the route that Hilton put of the team to Shangri-La and what happened in the film. In the book, they went from what is Peshawar in Pakistan to Baskul, which is actually an anagram for Kabul, Afghanistan. So that's where the airplane went to pick up people who were they were involved in a revolution. They were having revolutions and wars in Kabul back then too. And so the plane then takes off to go back to Peshawar, but it's hijacked by some people in the plane who take them through Tibet to a long trip to Tibet. They refuel, and then they go on and crash land in what is Shangri-La, which is in the area of Sichuan province, where near the kingdom of Muli. Now, Hilton, he's creating this fiction. He mentions the Kunlun range. Now, I have a map that shows that the different places where people have thought that Shangri-La might exist. Different people, for their own reasons, come up with, oh, I know where Shangri-La is. Some say it's in the Hunza region of Pakistan near K2. Others say it's in the Kunlun range, which is on the border between Qinghai province and Tibet. But I was going to go on an expedition, but couldn't. And the mountains of the Kunlun range are nothing at all like this. It has a nice name. It's a remote area, but it's not where it is. Some people say it's near the Brahmaputra River, and it's near the Namche Barwa, a peak in Tibet. Other people say it's in the Mustag region of Nepal. However, I came up with a lot of proof that shows that it really is in the Muli region. That's what he intended. What he, even though he didn't describe it as such, and pinpoint it, and he never identified where it really was, but he was modeling it after this area here. And I met a man named Xuan Ke in northern Yunnan province recently, who at about the same time as Peter and I were working on discovering it, he came up with the same conclusion, that essentially the Muli region was where Shangri-La was. His father had been an assistant to Joseph Rock, and when he was doing his expedition in the 1920s and 1930s. And so I visited him at his house. I have, if you want to look it up under Ted Vaill on YouTube, you'll see the interview I did with him, where he agreed that yes, the Muli region was Shangri-La. However, he didn't tell the Chinese that. He told the Chinese that a county named Zhongdian was where Shangri-La was. And he told me, I lied. I have family there. The Chinese have put me in prison for 20 years already. So I have family there, and I wanted to help the family. So I told them that Zhongdian was where Shangri-La was. So the Chinese said, we're going to make this a tourist destination. So they renamed the county Shangri-La County. And in Zhongdian, they now have tourists going there. You can fly to their Shangri-La, which has nothing to do with the real Shangri-La. You can fly there and have a great time exploring these places they've made up to look like Shangri-La. But I am convinced, and I won't bore you with going through the 20 points of proof, but some of them are the gold and things like that. But I came up with 20 different points of proof that this is the area of Shangri-La. And 2014, we decide, what does it look like now? What does this region look like now? So rather than go in over the high mountains, we decided to go in the other way. We went in, and this picture is taken from our trip in 2014 there. This man was a young monk at the monastery in 1999, and I have a video of him giving me an apple and some other fruit there. Now he's the number 2 monk in the monastery. He's still there, and I was very pleased to see him again. And when we arrived, after going through this, again, this landslide, which you'll see in the video, we get in at night, and the next morning we wake up, and now that is from the earlier, that's from the earlier trip. And by the way, the swastikas, Hitler stole a swastika from the Tibetans. It is a religious symbol, meaning a place of great religious significance. It's not a swastika, it's a Tibetan symbol, and Hitler just stole it and used it himself. But in 2014, we wake up in the morning, and I go to the window, and you'll see this in the video, and all of a sudden, I see this incredible structure that wasn't there when I was there in 1999. That, the new Shangri-La Monastery that was put in there, absolutely incredible. Built not with Chinese money, but with Tibetan money. Very, very costly. And as you climb up into the structure, near the top, there's some symbols at the very top made of pure gold. Absolutely amazing. And the interior of the structure is very, very ornate. And it wasn't even finished when we were there. It's finished now, and I'm sure is very, very popular. You can see that, the very ornate structure. We also went to a religious service there, and I have a picture of that too. That's in the video, which you'll see in a little bit as well. And we went to a classroom because in Tibetan culture, it's typical for them to give the smartest of their children, male children, to the monastery to be trained, usually from age 6 on. And some of them will remain monks for the rest of their life. Others will go through to maybe 18, and then will leave and return to civilian life. In fact, one of the men, young boys that we met earlier, a very young boy in 1999, we heard was at the university in Chengdu now, or back in 2014 was at the university. And so it was very nice to see the progress of these people. So you want to, let's see, where are we here? Yeah, that's the service in, that's the service that we attended there, which you'll see in the video. Can we show the video?
You want to roll the video?
Yes.
Let's give it a chance.
Give it a shot. Yes. Now that's me filming with the High Lama, not the same High Lama as before, and Mr. Su is there. Mr. Su is on the right there. And Mr. Su, in 2014, was no longer just a sports figure. He was now the number 2 member of the Communist Party in Muli province, and was a political figure. So we had with us, and he was with us because he wanted to be with us because he remembered our wonderful trip in 15 years before. So we go along this road. There he is, right there. On the left is Peter Klika, a member of the Adventurers Club that I mentioned earlier. with Mr. Su. And so we reach a point where the road is blocked, and they say, nobody goes by. So I go up to Mr. Su and said, can you take care of this? He ambles up to the people, and he says, we go right on through.
Well, I hope
So
that
that's what happens when you have
Shangri-La.
Guanxi in that part of China.
So I think we have the video going out on the stream, but it's not on the monitors.
So what do we do? What, can't do it?
Well, we can let it continue to run on YouTube, but it's about 10 minutes worth.
Who's watching it? Can anybody see it? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we do that then?
Can we pause it and take questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, yes.
Yes.
Anyway, so,
Who's got it?
so I've been to Leh. Leh is in India, on the Tibetan border. When I was there many years ago, I was told that Leh is where many of the Tibetans fled when the Chinese took over. Have you been there? Do you know about that?
Well, many of them did flee to Nepal, and as I mentioned earlier, when I was when I went there in 1969, I hired a Tibetan to go with me to climb Mardi Himal, and then I went to his Tibetan village outside of Pokhara, a major city in the western part of Nepal.
You might also check in to Leh, like I say, because there were many Tibetan monasteries,
Yeah.
and to get there they just opened this road. This is maybe 15 years ago.
Right.
And so we went in from Srinagar. It was like a 3-day trip over road, and this road is only open maybe a couple months
So,
ago.
but Leh is in India, right?
in
Is
India,
it?
that's
yes,
right.
not in Nepal. Yeah.
No, but I was just, like I say, I was told that many of the Tibetans fled to Leh
Right.
when the Chinese took over.
Well, the High Lama, Dalai Lama, whom I met, he lives in Dharamshala in the high mountains of northern India, near the Tibet border. So it definitely has there's a huge Tibetan population throughout that region. I don't know whether Bhutan has it, but certainly the Bhutanese are pretty self-contained people, and I don't think they like to have people coming in from outside, even tourists now. But in Nepal and India, particularly, not necessarily Pakistan. Yeah.
So Lost Horizons, one of my favorite books of all time. I was surprised to hear you say that James Hilton had never been to Tibet. I always assumed he had some experience there. Do you know what inspired him to start researching that area, or was he doing random research and then was struck by that area? Do you know?
He never revealed where Shangri-La was, and I don't think he revealed why he got interested in that area. It may have come from the fact that in the post-World War I era, there were many people, British people, who had PTSD from service in World War I. And they were sort of a lost generation in the 1920s. And Conway was one of those people who was the hero of the book. Ronald Coleman played in the film. He was of the lost generation. Plus, then you had the Depression. So I think he wanted to create something, sort of an escape for people to go to. And so he said, okay, how about Tibet? And so he did research. I mean, I've written a number of screenplays. You get an idea and you process it and you expand it, And then you say, I don't know anything about this area, so you get some research. Where do you get research? British Museum Library. And then he finds Joseph Rock's articles. And then he finds missionary books about people who come through the region. And he creates a story. And this is a man who died at age 54 in 1954, never really revealing where it was. He went to Hollywood and did some work in Hollywood on various books and films and things like that. After and Goodbye, Mr. Chips was another one of his famous books and films. So he just was a very good writer, graduate of Cambridge University, and I think that's how he found out. But I don't know that he ever really specifically told them why he started to do that. And I'm a member of what's called the Hilton Society. It's a group of people who study the works and life of James Hilton. And and they publish a quarterly newsletter. I've actually spoken to them and done some writings about Shangri-La being where I say it is.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah, Ted, just curious. So he wrote the book. Did he write the screenplay?
No, he did not. He did not write the screenplay. It was Harry Cohn, who was one of the terrors of the film industry at the time. He owned pretty much Columbia Studios, and he bought the rights to the book, and then had his own writer write it. Although Hilton was there and was a consultant on the book, and but he had a big role in everything that happened in the film. And I actually have in the film Frank Capra's son speaking the role of Frank Capra, because I have some letters that Frank Capra wrote, and I had his son read the letters to the audience about his casting of the film and his thoughts on it, and particularly how Jane Wyatt was an unknown, an ingenue from Broadway that had really never been in any major film, and she was cast in the romantic lead opposite Ronald Colman, who was one of the great film stars, romantic film stars of the era. And if you see the film, you'll see some of the greatest love scenes that you've ever seen in your life. Not sexual, but just the look that they have towards each other, and it's very powerful. But did I answer your question or not?
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
I've read in a recent book, it's something like The Ground Beneath Their Feet, or The Mountains Beneath Their Feet, that Hilton visited Gilgit Hunza before he wrote the book. So that's an Ismaili Muslim place, and that they do have a lot of long-lived people that they attribute to apricots that are grown in the valley.
Yes, but I don't think Hilton ever went outside England to anywhere, really. So that I think is a myth.
Okay.
But yeah, the Hunza people are very long-lived, and that also is an element of the book too, that people live a long life. But they live a long life in the book because if they ever leave the valley, they revert to their true age.
Oh. Okay, anyone else?
Over here? Yeah.
A mystical paradise of contentment where time stands still and youth is eternal.
Hi, James Hilton. This is a point of interest to me that as early as 1942, that President Roosevelt actually made a famous comment referencing Shangri-La following the Doolittle raid in 1942 without wanting to reveal the...
Yeah, he said, he was asked where the planes, what happened, 30 seconds over Tokyo, right after the Pearl Harbor, the aircraft carrier was able to have B-24s or B-17s take off from B-25s off from carriers, which was pretty difficult to do. And they were never going to make it back to the carriers, but they took off Doolittle and bombed Tokyo. And then went on from there to Russia and China, and some of them were captured and tortured in Japan. But he was asked where the planes came from, and he said, Shangri-La. And Camp David was originally named Shangri-La by Roosevelt.
And so if you could just comment on that, because I find it amazing that as early as 1942, that the President of the United States is already making a reference, assuming everyone's going to know what it means to go. So if you could just comment even briefly about what you feel the legacy of Shangri-La is to, whether it was Roosevelt and to all adventurers since then, since as early as 1942. Obviously, to make a reference like that, you would have assumed that it was something everyone would recognize was something exotic and adventurous. So you can maybe just comment on what you feel the legacy of Shangri-La is.
Well, the name itself was invented by Hilton. You have Shambhala, which is a Tibetan symbol of a utopian area. So he took that and changed it to make La sort of means pass in Tibetan. So Shangri-La, he invented the term. So it resonated with people because in 1933, the depths of the Depression, the world needed a place like this. And nobody knew if there was a place like that. And so they wanted to believe that there was such a place. And people will come up and say, I know where Shangri-La is. Boy, and it's in near Namche Barwa, it's the Hunza, it's the Mustang, it's and so on. And when we came up with it, I was doing interviews on every continent except Antarctica about Shangri-La. But unlike people who had no proof that these areas were, I had lots of proof as to the fact that this was the model. There is no Shangri-La, but this is Hilton's model for it, and it lives up to it. So I would urge you to go there if you're interested. You can do it. You can go to Chengdu, and you can arrange trips down there. That road is not good, going in from Xichang and going over the mountains passes. Right now, going in from the north, where we had to hike up to the Snow Mountain Monastery and then walk up the valley and then walk. Now you can drive up to the Snow Mountain Monastery, and they put in a boardwalk all the way to Jambayang Peak, just so you don't walk and damage the Esha around in the area there. So they've sort of, and this man, Mr. Clark, BBC guy who talked to me, just went in there 2 years ago, and he said, Ted, you will hate this. There are thousands of Tibetans crawling all over the area. This is on the north side of the four mountain passes. They're not really able to get over those passes into the Shangri-La Valley. But in the northern end, which is near where Jambayang is, and also a little bit farther out is where the Chinese say Shangri-La is, but it's 100 miles away. So you can come in from the north and have the refresher that you've been to Shangri-La, but you've not been to the Shangri-La Monastery, which is the beautiful monastery that you saw to the south, which you will see in the film if we can. Any other questions?
Looks like no other questions. I think we have the film more or less queued up.
Okay, let's do it.
Let me check on that in a minute. Does anybody else have any other questions they can think of to ask? All right, we got Ken over here.
Do the people of that Muli area, do they think that is Shangri-La? Are they familiar with Hilton's book?
No. I mean, maybe now, after people have come in there and talked about it, that they might, but I think they don't need to, because they realize this area is a holy place. They have the Fountain of Youth, they have the 3 holy peaks that they do circumambulation, and they have the monastery. So it is already their Shangri-La. They don't need to have a Westerner tell them a story about the place, because they know it.
We want to run it from the,
I may have done some recovering here.
from the 57-minute mark. Otherwise,
all right,
we
so
got
hey,
an hour and a half of stuff.
The good news, Rich, is I got. If we have to
Yeah, well, they're now running most of the whole film, but I don't know if you want to see the whole thing, but it's.
I think we're working on getting it back to the.
Okay, we'll start watching this. This shows. Do we have sound? Do we have sound?
Still working on that.
Oh, well, I will do the picture of that.
So narration would be good.
Yes.
And a former State Department officer and an authority on Chinese culture.
So that's Peter Klika with the High Lama. And
private collections on 2 continents.
here we have Peter.
Researched Hollywood's archives.
Here we are.
To find out the true story behind the making of director Frank Capra's Lost Horizon, and whether it might point the way to the real Shangri-La. They talked to the only person still living who worked on the film, a star with a 50-year career in Hollywood, Jane Wyatt.
I'm sure there's a wish for Shangri-La in everyone's heart. And I just know that secretly they're all hoping to find a garden.
There's the Frank Lloyd Wright version of Shangri-La.
There's beauty and comfort.
But where did Hilton get his information to conceive of Shangri-La in the Himalayas, a place he had never visited? The answer to that question came when Peter found an obscure National Geographic magazine in a dusty bookstore, which mentioned a peculiar kingdom in an isolated corner of Tibet, and led them down a trail of tantalizing clues. Their research uncovered a series of articles, photographs, and motion picture records taken by renowned Austrian explorer Joseph Rock, the only Westerner ever to visit this kingdom. These articles were published several years before Hilton wrote Lost Horizon, and in them, Ted and Peter discovered startling similarities to the book, which were unmistakable. The mountains that make the area almost inaccessible. The sacred peak, described as a dazzling pyramid of snow. The rich gold deposits. Could Hilton have used these articles as the basis of his fictional land? Could this king be the model for the High Lama in the book and the movie? Join the only 2 adventurers to explore this region in modern times on their quest to bring back waters from the fountain of eternal youth and
that's the
prove
old
that
monastery.
Shangri-La could really exist after all.
So this is an hour-long film. I don't know if you want to watch that much.
Yeah.
You might speed it up.
Let's see if we can get to the other mark.
I don't know whether it was called a bestseller in those days, but everybody was reading this book called Lost Horizon. All people relate to Lost Horizon because I think we're all looking for a utopia. I mean, the whole world is in such a state of all the war. I mean, it's a disagreeable world now. And to be able to get to someplace like Shangri-La, where it's all peace and quiet and beautiful.
Okay.
No, I think they're going to speed it up a little bit because I've been over a lot of this already.
Well, Ted, can you tell us where we can see the full film if we're interested? Here we go. Nice work.
I'm selling it privately now. I don't. The full film is not available for
We are at the Muli Monastery.
privately.
This is the boy in the picture.
Okay, now here we are. This is the end of now we're going to go into the...
We showed the monks video of themselves, and for the first time, they saw themselves as others see them.
See you soon, next year.
Truly, our Shangri-La has merged with the real Shangri-La.
Now, this picture doesn't necessarily match what I'm saying.
Gentlemen, I give you a toast. Here's my hope that Robert Conway
This is from the Frank Capra film.
Shangri-La. Here's my hope that we all find our Shangri-La.
And that's the message. We hope that Conway finds
Well, I
his
hope that
Shangri-La.
everybody finds their Shangri-La.
And we hope that we all find our Shangri-La. That is the message of the film and the book. So this is not matching up the video. So you're...
I think we're just over our heads in technicality here.
You're right about the point where the second film picks up now.
Yeah, it's playing, but it's not moving.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to be able to make this work.
Okay, well, I guess we have to finish it then. But you asked, it was shown on television. It's been stolen by the Chinese. It's been stolen by the Iranians. So it's sold privately by me on behalf of our group. And so that's it.
So is there a place where anyone can go if they wanted to buy a copy?
Talk to me. I have a couple copies here if you want to buy it.
But for our general viewing audience, if they're...
Yeah.
Is there a website or something they can go to?
Just contact Ted Vaill at AOL.com. I have my cards here.
Okay.
So if you want it, see the whole thing. But I've got a picture of what the new monastery looks like, you know. We intentionally decided that if we put it out there, it's going to get taken by everybody, and we're not going to have control of it anymore. And
so maybe we'll have an opportunity to do a movie night here one night.
Sure, we can see the whole thing.
Do a screening and then sell copies to people.
Right. Okay.
Well, Ted, sorry for the technical difficulties. We're struggling a little, and sorry it didn't work out, but really appreciate you coming down and spending the time with us and sharing your story. It was fascinating.
Well, I do have a little bit of the water. If
Holy water.
this is it,
I'm ready for my pour.
come and get it.
Take a picture before and after.
Right.
Yes. We'll get a time lapse photography.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Right.
I feel healthier already.
You will.
Thank you very much.
I used to have gray hair.
So as I understand it, the 10-minute section is going to be on YouTube. So even though we didn't catch it here, we can tune into YouTube.
Sure,
and
okay.
watch it there.
All right, yeah. All right, do that. All right.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. Don't forget to look us up on Spotify if you want to take it on the road with you and listen to us in the car on the way to work. Thanks for another night at the Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. Join us next week for another great program. Good night, everyone.
I think they got enough out of that to understand what's going on there.
Okay.
I think real quick, just everybody, I think we're